Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Wheeler, and I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober by the grace of God and the 36 spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous since January 1st, 2004. For that, I am very grateful. Thank you all for that. And Steve, thank you for running the meeting and your service to the group. It's nice to see everybody. The I'm tasked with talking about steps 6 and 7 today, and I love talking about the steps. I love sharing my experience with the steps. I'm gonna qualify myself first. So I think it's relevant for you to understand a little bit about me as I talk about 6 and 7. The I'm in Carbondale, Colorado, which is about $4.5 million south of Aspen. It's where all the people that can't afford to live in Aspen live, and I've spent my life here. This is where I grew up in Aspen, and I have my family here, and my both ways. My mom and dad are here. My kids are here. My grandkids are here, and I love it here. It's very nice, and it's very hot today, so I'm going to take this jacket off early. But I try to dress so that people can tell how important Alcoholics Anonymous is to me when I show up at a podium. And it's always my pleasure to be asked to do something in Alcoholics Anonymous. It saved my life. And this thing is life and death. And it's easy for us to forget that, when we get caught up in the minutia of the day and the problem du jour as we try and deal with it with self. And what I can tell you is 6 and 7 is based on the fact that there is not any manifestation of self that will take care of my problems. The journey into Alcoholics Anonymous is me trying to fix this thing. I'm rolling around with alcoholism, and for a period of time, I had no idea what alcoholism was. And I spent most of my life on a family ranch, and my mom and dad love Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. And anytime there's a holiday, mom says, bring anybody that doesn't have any place to come, because she loves Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. And I'm sitting at the ranch holiday table in the last few years, and I got a new guy with me that had no place to go. It's funny, we end up alone. We're the only people on the planet, I think, that treat loneliness with isolation. And he didn't have any place to go, and I invited him up to the ranch for the holiday, and we're sitting at the table, and he says to me, and he says, when did you take your first drink? And I said, well, I was probably 8 years old when I took my first drink, and my mom heard me. And she said from across the table, she said, you did not take your first drink when you were 8 years old. She's calling me a liar in front of the new guy. And I said, no, Mom, I did. I said, Dad and I used to go snowmobiling. We'd ride for a couple hours, and then we'd stop to have lunch, and we'd eat lunch. And Dad had a Bota bag full of peach brandy, and he would give me a sip, and to warm me up. And it did warm me up. I liked it. And anywhere we went, Dad and I, from that point on, I always checked to see if he had the Bota bag. I didn't start drinking regularly when I was 8 years old, but that was my first drink, and I remember it. And I said and my mom's hearing me explain this, and she's getting pissed off at my dad because she thinks that it had something to do with me being an alcoholic. And I said to her, I said, Mom, Dad giving me that alcohol had nothing to do with me becoming an alcoholic. I said, I'm an alcoholic because of two things. One, when I put alcohol in my body, I get that phenomenon of craving. I get that allergy that it talks about in our textbook, and I said it makes me thirsty, and that's not a normal reaction. And I said the phenomenon of craving is one of the things that makes me an alcoholic. And trying to explain the phenomenon of craving to somebody that's never experienced it is almost impossible. But when I talk about it here, everybody shakes their head. You know exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about phenomenon. By definition, is something you can't explain. And the magic here is that you guys shake your head and say, yeah, that gift of identification, that this is the first place I came where people understood exactly what I was talking about. And I said, that's not the only thing, Mom. I also have this mental component, this obsession of the mind, this insanity of the mind, that when I'm stone cold sober, standing in the burning wreckage of my life one more time, I have a mind that convinces me one more time that it's a good idea to take a drink, stone cold sober. And the cool thing is that peace, that mental obsession, that insanity of the mind when I'm stone cold sober is what Alcoholics Anonymous treats. And it took me a long time to understand. I thought you take away the alcohol and that would treat my alcoholism. And it doesn't. You take away the alcohol from a guy like me and my mind gets worse. It gets busy. And my life got worse when you took away the alcohol. I couldn't, that restlessness, that irritability, that discontentedness that is talked about in the doctor's opinion comes on me hard, sober. And Alcoholics Anonymous treats that condition. I didn't start drinking regularly when I was 8, but by the time I was 12 years old, I was in trouble in every area of my life, and I was seeing a school counselor. And that school counselor, she was a really astute woman, and she put together the fact that everything I talked about had two things in common. One of them was me, and the other was alcohol. And she took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 13 years old in Aspen, and we walked into the community center. I don't know, it was dark out, so it was an evening meeting. And we walked in there, and there were probably 6 or 8 people sitting around a card table, and they all had gray hair or looked like they should have gray hair. And I did what my ego and my self-centeredness does everywhere I go. I saw all the differences. The only thing that I came out of that meeting with that became important later on in my life was the fact that there's something called Alcoholics Anonymous. But other than that, nothing. And I continued to see that school counselor for a couple of weeks, and we had a deal. And I'm 13 years old, and I cut a deal with the counselor that I would only drink beer on the weekends, and I wouldn't drink Jack Daniels anymore. And that's a pretty good deal when you're 13. And in the first weekend that after I had made that deal, I stuck to it, and I wanted to stick to it. And I went out and I only drank beer, and I didn't drink anything during the week, and drank the beer on the weekends. And the next weekend, it was a totally different story because we ran out of beer early. And you know the story, there was still Jack Daniels, and I drank the Jack Daniels, and I was so embarrassed that I could not follow through with that agreement that I never went back and saw that counselor again. I was just, I'm the guy rolling around in my life looking at all the people I'm running with and comparing myself as we do. And I couldn't figure it out. How come they weren't in trouble? I didn't realize that I was going through a different set of friends every day, and that they were going home and they were going to school and they didn't have alcoholism. But what I thought is that they could drink and that their self-will was stronger than mine. That's just, didn't add up. So that's how I added it up. And, I found out later on that there's something, we come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll hear in the rooms that we just felt different then. We felt, like we didn't fit in. And the cool thing is when you go through the doctor's opinion, you find out that you are different. I am different than most of the people out there. I should feel different. I don't react the same way as most people when you put alcohol in my body. And that's good news for a guy like me to find out I'm actually different, but the cool thing is we come in here and we're all the same. We're all doing the same thing. You know, when I talk to you about the phenomenon of craving, when I talk to you about the mental insanity, the obsession of this thing, and the stories of my life of trying not to be that guy and not getting it done, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all been there. That's the magic here is we're all talking, we're singing the same music, we're dancing the same steps. And yes, it's a little bit different for all of us, but we all know the basis of it. And that's good news because finally I find a place that I fit. And I can tell you that by the time I was 18 years old, I had left my house. I used to say my parents threw me out of the house, but that's not the truth. Due to good sponsorship in the steps, I found out that what my parents did was lay down some rules that if I want to live in their house, I have to do these three things. And as much as I wanted to, I couldn't live up to those rules. And they were simple. You know, is be where you say you're going to be, help out around the house, and do what you say you're going to do. And you know, if you suffer the spiritual malady, this alcoholism like I do, those are impossible tasks. You know, I could not do those things. And I blew it up. I made it my parents' fault. And I moved out of the house when I was 18. And one thing led to another, and I was homeless. And I'm living in a park in a one of those playhouses, jungle gyms in a park, and I'd go until I couldn't go anymore, and then I'd crawl up in there and I'd pass out, and I'd come to and be game on again. And one night I was out and I OD'd in the park in Aspen, 18 years old, and it's you know I OD'd. It's really tough to measure the proper amount of cocaine one should take when you've just polished off a fifth of Crown Royal. And I ended up overshooting the mark, which is the story of my life. And I ended up ODing, and I was scared. And I went into the hospital, and they treated me, and I could tell the doctors and the nurses were scared. They didn't think I was going to make it. I didn't think I was going to make it. And it touched that place inside. And there was a girl that hung out with us. Her name was Karen, and she was a good friend, and she hung out with the posse of people I ran with at the time. And when I came to in the hospital, I started thinking about her because I had noticed that she had gone away a few months earlier for 28 days. Where do you go for 28 days? And she came back, and she was remarkable. She would come up to us in the afternoon and say, "Listen, I'm not going out with you guys tonight. I've got to go home because I've got to work tomorrow." And she would actually go home, and she would actually go to work the next day. And whenever I saw her, she was smiling and happy and seemed to be doing really well in life. And I had noticed it. And I called her that morning when I got out of the hospital. And I said, "Karen, what did you do?" And she said, "Well, I went to a treatment center where they separated me from alcohol, and now I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous." And she talked to me for the first time anybody had explained to me what alcoholism is. And she talked to me about the doctor's opinion and the phenomenon of craving and the mental obsession and that restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness that gets on me when I'm sober. And she told me some of her story, as we do. Cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, when we come in here, it's the first place we come where people aren't telling me what I should do. You know, that's what everybody else did. You should stop drinking. You should act like a gentleman. You should go be more responsible, telling me what I should do. And what she did was she told me about her. And that's what we do here is we share our story. And in that story, we get touched. And she shared her story, and for the first time ever, it sounded like she had put her finger on the problem I was suffering. And I understood it at a different level. And I did what all tough guys do at that time. I called my mother, and I told her, "I think I'm in trouble, and I'd like to talk to you." My mom's a saint. And she said, "Okay." I hadn't talked to her in a long time. You know, I'd cut her out of my life because it was inconvenient. And she agreed to meet with me, and we met at my place, and we're sitting on the park bench. And I said to my mom, I said, "I'm in trouble, and I think I'm an alcoholic." And this is really important. What she said to me is, she said, Jack, no, you're not. You can't be. Because she thought that if I was an alcoholic, it made her a bad mother. She thought if I was an alcoholic, it made the community would look down on her. She thought if I was an alcoholic, the community would look down on me. That stigma's got to go away. This thing is not about being good or bad. You know, there's bad behavior that goes with alcoholism, and we have steps for that. This thing's about being sick and well. And I have news for you that well is available right here, right now, today. And as I said, my mom's a saint. She made it possible for me to go to treatment. And I went into treatment in 1982 at 18 years old. And the cool thing is that I went in there, and it was like coming into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I met some people that were dealing with the same thing. I didn't feel out of place. I felt like I belonged. And the funny thing is that I was not a model patient. You know, I just wasn't. It's not how I'm wired. And I got checked out of that place, and I'm heading up to Aspen, and Aspen was a 4-hour drive from where that treatment facility was, and I was scared. I hadn't drank in 28 days, and I didn't want to drink, and I had no plan. And I was thinking on the way home on the drive that I remember hearing the staff in a break room. They weren't talking to us, they were talking to each other, and they were drinking coffee. And one of them said to the other staff members, if we could just get these knuckleheads to go to an AA meeting, the first day they get out, their chances of long-term recovery would skyrocket. And I'm sitting there thinking about that on my way up to Aspen, to home. And one of the great coincidences of my life. It wasn't like it is now, where there's 5 meetings a week within 20 miles up here. You know, there was at the time, I believe there was 2 meetings a week in Aspen. And one of the great coincidences of my life, that I rolled into town on that Tuesday, and there was a meeting that night. And I found the meeting, and I went to the meeting, and you know, there was probably 15 people around the card tables at this point. They still all had gray hair. And they would read something out of the book, and it would go around the table, and everybody would share their experience with what was read. And it would come to me, and I threw down about cocaine and Quaaludes, and you know, that's how we roll. I'm sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, dying of self-centered alcoholism. And I just wanted to be different. And you know what you said to me. You said, keep coming back. And there was a guy in that meeting that took me through the steps, and I had the awakening that's promised, and I started sponsoring guys, and one thing led to another, and all the outside stuff started falling into place. I got the house, I got the business, I got married, I had the kids. It was all good. And I was probably 7 or 8 years sober at the time. And I'm driving down to my home group, and I think to myself, there's a hatch coming off the river to get from the ranch to where my home group was. You got to drive 25 miles down one of the most incredible trout streams on the planet. And I'm an avid fly fisherman, and there's a hatch coming off the river, and I think to myself, I should fish. And I did. I stopped the truck, and I got out and fished. And you know what happened to me when I missed my home group and went fishing? Nothing. I went fishing. A couple weeks later, I'm driving down the hill and to the Thursday night meeting, and that hatch is coming off again. And I think to myself, I should fish. And I pulled over and I fished. And you know what happened to me when I fished that night? Nothing. I went fishing. The insidious nature of this thing is I can't see it on me. When the veil of alcoholism is dropping down around my eyes one more time, I can't see it. That's why we do this thing together. That's why we're here today, is because left to my own devices, I can't see it, and I can't fix it. The essence of the 6th step is I can't fix it. And I slowly unplugged from Alcoholics Anonymous, and at 13 years sober, I drank again. And I'd like to tell you, with all my knowledge of the book and the guys I've sponsored and the spiritual awakening I had and everything else, that I came running back to you, but I'm powerless over alcohol. And it owned me once again. And I was out for 10 years. And it's a long story how I got back. I'm not going to tell it because that's not what I'm here for. But I'm here to tell you that I did get back. And today I work the program like my life depends on it, because it does. At the same time, the interesting thing is when that transformation happens in the steps, it's been a long time since I've gone to a meeting because Jack needed a meeting. I go to meetings because it's my spiritual responsibility to carry the message. I go to meetings because I do regular things regularly in Alcoholics Anonymous. I show up to my home group regularly. I call my sponsor regularly. I answer my phone regularly. I have a current experience with the steps because I work them regularly. They've become the fabric of my life. And that's what we do here, is we do regular things regularly. Because if I leave my sobriety up to Jack, I am going to be screwed. And what I can tell you about the sixth and the seventh step is that it's like the voodoo shit in Alcoholics Anonymous. We all talk about it. I think, I've heard people say all things like, it's only that long in the big book because there's nothing else to say, which sounds cool. And I parroted it at meetings because I thought it sounded cool. And, but I can tell you some of the most incredible experiences I've had in Alcoholics Anonymous are a result of the sixth and the seventh step. I'm the guy that's had a journey here where step six, at certain times, I would, if we talked about it, I'd list my character defects to you just so you knew I knew them. And the reality is it doesn't ask me for that list anywhere. In the inventory work that we go through, there's an awareness that comes up that I'm looking at some patterns in my life where grandiosity, self-righteousness, just these extreme examples of self-centeredness keep popping up in my life in various ways. And what I can tell you is that it's important for me to see that. But what's even more important for me to see as I'm rolling from step 5 to step 6, there's a piece of work there where it says we took a look at the first 5 proposals. Well, what am I looking at? I'm looking at the insane behavior, the insane patterns of my life. I'm looking at how they're serving me. Am I powerless over them? Is my life unmanageable? Do I believe that God will restore me to sanity? Or do I still think that some manifestation of self that I can summon will take care of these character defects? And the story is that it's been varied. There have been times in my recovery where I thought some manifestation of self, some different application of my moral high ground would take care of these things. And what I found through the journey of doing this work is that the most important thing in step 6 is I can't fix it. I can't fix it. It says in the book, these things have become objectionable to me. And I can tell you, when something is objectionable to me, it gets my attention. When it's objectionable to you, when it's objectionable to my wife or my kids or the guys that work with me, it's not that important to me. But when it becomes objectionable to me, I'm going to give it some attention. And the insanity of alcoholism is I continue to try to push self at it to fix it. And I can tell you it is fruitless. It does not work. I've been trying to fix these things all my life. I'm the guy, I've got a good sense of moral value. The world teaches us that. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry out there called marketing that tells me if I have the right watch, if I have the right car, if I have the right job, if I have the right house, that I'll be able to be the man I want to be. And what I can tell you is that I can't. It doesn't work. The madness of alcoholism is I've been trying that, and it doesn't work. And what the book tells me, the sixth step asks us 4 questions. It presents 4 things at me. The first one, as we go into the 6th step, is it asks me if this character defect is objectionable. Is it objectionable to Jack? That's the first thing it asks me. And yes, it says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? I have admitted they're objectionable. I do not want to be that guy. This is not serving any, it's not working. And then it asks us, can you do anything about it? How's that going? You know, it's great, Jack. Now you have a list of 18 character defects. Let's go to work on them. That's how I used to think. And what it tells me actually is I see these patterns in my life and I have been ineffective at fixing them. I can't fix it. So that's the proposition it's asking me. Can you fix it? And the answer is no. I have thrown everything I've got at it, and I can't get it done. So then it asks you if you're willing to let God. Can he, capital H, take them all, every one? I've just been through a piece of work in 4 and 5 where I'm trying to get to that place in step 3 where it says he's my director. And I can tell you that it has been, I am willing to let God remove them. Please take them. And the 4th thing, the kicker in step 6 is the hardest piece is, are you willing to let him any way he sees fit? And that's the hard piece for me because I got a plan. My ego says it should look like this. And I'm not willing to be in the place of Jack, to be me and let God do his work. It's never quick enough. It's never shiny enough. And the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's the greatest thing that happens to all of us. But the greatest thing, I realized this one day, the greatest thing that ever happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't get what I wanted. Because if I would have gotten what I wanted, I would have sold this thing short. I did not know what was possible. And I had an experience early on in recovery that showed me that when I was in treatment and I was in the large group, and then this big Indian counselor comes up to me and he's in my face. And he says, I want you to write down everything you want from sobriety in a year. And I did it quickly because I wanted to go smoke a cigarette and get out of group. And I wrote down what I wanted. I handed it in and I went and smoked a cigarette. And it's a year later and I'm sitting in my living room, a sober, active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my wife walks in and hands me a letter from the mail. And I said, what's this? She said, I don't know. And I opened the letter and it was what I had written down a year before in that large group of what I wanted from sobriety in a year. And I got news for you. Nothing that was important to me that day was on that list. Because we don't know what's possible. We have no idea. And that's the good news. And if you're new here, I hope you don't get what you want. Because you'll sell God short. You'll sell Alcoholics Anonymous short. You know, I can't tell you how many times. It says in the big book, it says in the doctor's opinion, It says an alcoholic, that our problems pile up on us and become astonishingly difficult to solve. How many people here have experienced that? I have. How many people in here have experienced that with years of sobriety? I have. And the amazing thing, when our problems pile up on us and become astonishingly difficult to solve, the only thing we can see is the astonishing pile. And I call my sponsor, or I talk to one of the guys, or one of the guys that I sponsor call me, and their eyes glued to that astonishing pile. And I tell them the same thing you guys told me. Stop looking at the pile. The pile's not the problem. The pile is not the problem. But we think if we fix all that external stuff, everything in here is going to be taken care of. And my experience is the only way to take care of what's in here, which is the real problem, is to get closer to God. You know, we do this stuff and we think if we do this, we're going to get this great life. Well, on page 77, right after the seventh step prayer, it tells us, it says, at the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get that astonishing pile so it's not so astonishing. I'm trying to put my life in order. It says, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. The answers always get closer to you and God, and the pile diminishes when I'm not working on the pile. And that's what step 6 says. Stop working on the pile. Come on, Jack, you've proven it to yourself time and time again that you've been trying to fix this stuff. And every single guy, bar none, is staring at the astonishing pile, including me. And I got a crew of guys in my life today, and I got a relationship with a power greater than me. And it peels my eye off that pile much quicker today than it ever has. And I know that the answer is to get closer to God, because I can't fix it. I cannot fix it. So what's the whole point of what we're doing? In step 3, and I think step 3 is the entire solution to alcoholism. It says that being all powerful, God, and I use the word God because you know exactly what I'm talking about, even though you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. And I use the word God because you just know what I'm talking about. Being all powerful, He, capital H, God, will provide everything I need. Everything. And I have to do 2 things. And one of them is not resolving the astonishing pile. One is to stay close to Him. And the cool thing is, in order to stay close to Him, I have to get close to Him. And the promise of these steps is I'll get close to God. And then if I continue with commitment and persistence, I'll stay close to God and perform His work well. His, not mine. I'm focused on the pile. He's not. So my granddaughter, who I'm madly in love with, Abigail, when she was 4 years old, I said to her, I said, Abigail, what's your favorite color? And she's the love of my life. She said, Grandpa, my favorite color is orange. And I said, Abigail, what's your second favorite color? She said, Grandpa, my second favorite color is orange. Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? Orange is available. And it struck me that way. Hey, Jack, what's your favorite solution? My favorite solution is God. Hey, Jack, what's your second favorite solution? My second favorite solution is God. I got news for you. My favorite color is orange. And my second favorite color is orange. And it's available right here, right now. And what I got to do is get closer to God, not fix the astonishing pile. And Abigail was probably 7. And I asked her, because I was checking my story, because I've been telling the story a long time. And I said, Abigail, what's your favorite color? She said, Grandpa, my favorite color is orange. I said, Abigail, what's your second favorite color? And she said, Grandpa, my second favorite color is chocolate. I'm thinking to myself, that's not the story. I want to shake her. But the reality is that's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's life. You know, we're all on fire for this thing. I'll go out of here today knowing that my second favorite color is orange. But by Wednesday, something will come up. And that astonishing pile will be in my face, and I'll think it's money, or I think it's health issues, or I think it's something other than God. And we have this, the worldly clamors is what it's called in our textbook. And we have this program of action that brings me back to God every time. She's not, I can get in on chocolate. I'm that guy. But I know that I suffer this thing, this malady, this illness, and my life's on the line. It's not just my life, it's the lives of a bunch of other guys too. And then I need to remember that this thing's about God. And I can't do that alone. I can no sooner fix my character. If I could fix my character defects, you'd have a different speaker. I could find other things to do today. And what I know today is I am so pleased to be a part of this thing and participate in something that brings me back to you and God every single time, and peels my eyeball off of that pile, because the pile's not the problem. In our textbook, in 3 places, it talks about the transformation, and talks about it as a change of heart. And 6 and 7 is the beginning of that change of heart. For me, that's my experience. And the change of heart, when something transformed who I be at my core, they transform it at my heart. I change my mind all the time. It's just the way I am. I'm a nut sometimes. Something shiny will get in my eye, and I'll change my mind. But when you change my heart, it's there to stay. In step 7, I can't tell you how many guys come to me in step 7 and talk about giving their character defects to God. And I point to the simple prayer that's in our book. If you give him your list, I guarantee you're going to get it wrong. It's just the way we are. My ego is involved. And the cool thing is in the prayer, it says, God, take all of me, good and bad. It doesn't say take the bad stuff and leave me the good stuff. And that's that change of who I be. I'm a principled man. I live a spiritual life. That means that all of it is in that package. And that's my prayer today. God, take all of me, good and bad, and put me to good use. Put me to work. Because you take a guy like me and you give me purpose, it changes my whole life. And that's what happens in 6 and 7. There's a story that I want to share. So 6 and 7 is it's funny. It's the jumping off place. And it's my sponsor said at one point, he said, Jack, I didn't know what my job was in 7. And I finally told him that after lying to him for a long time. How you doing on 7? Good, Don, thank you. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And finally, I told him that. And he said, Jack, here's your job. He said, our job in step 7 is to take it to God. That's our job. God's job is to take care of it. Your job is to act as if he did. And when he first told me that, I thought he was telling me to act as if I don't have any character defects, but that's not what he was telling me. He was telling me to act as if God's the power. And my whole life changed because God is the power. So what do we do with that? I was a captain on the volunteer fire department for 18 years. And when I was a rookie, they signed us up for the fire academy. And you go to the fire academy and there's a burn building. And we're all sitting outside the burn building, can't wait to go in because we get to play with fire and water. And that's why we joined the fire department in the first place, is to watch stuff burn and put it out. And we're sitting outside and we're watching crews go in and out of the burn building. And some of them were coming out and their face shield would be melted down around their helmet, and they're pulling their bunker gear off and their Nomex hoods, and there's little red burn marks on them. You can just tell that there was some serious stuff going on in that burn building. And my team gets called up and we go in, and there's a couple old veterans sitting on the side of the fire to watch us, and that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous, in case you haven't learned. The old guys will sit around and let you have an experience. And these guys were going to let us have an experience. They were going to keep us safe, but they were going to let us have an experience. And we walked in, and I know what to do when in a fire: put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. And I went in there, and they flare it up, and they have it set up so that the wall that you're looking at just from the bottom up starts to burn, and it's significant. And the first thing you do is open the hose and you spray the fire. And I open the hose and I spray the fire, and the guys on either side, the old guys, are saying, no, 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 shut the hose off. And you could see it in the room, a clear line of the heat layer. And the minute I put the fire on the water on the fire, the heat layer dropped in the room. And it just so happens it melted the face mask on my helmet down around my helmet, and it got really hot in there. And they said, you don't do that. You don't hit the fire first. He said, what you have to do is you have to cool the room first. So you start at the ceiling with the water, and you bring the water across the ceiling, and you bring the water down the wall, and it cools off the environment so that when you put the fire out, the steam doesn't push the heat layer down on top of you. So they taught us how to treat the atmosphere of the burn building first, because you can't put the fire out unless you treat the atmosphere first. And the best atmosphere for 6 and 7 is 8 through 12. I'm not working on my character defects. I'm working the steps to get closer to you and God, and in changing the atmosphere of my life, my character defects fall away. If you ask some people in my family what some of my character defects were, they'd bring up stubbornness, and they'd tell you I'm stubborn as a mule. But in God's hands, that stubbornness looks like persistence. It looks like commitment. It looks like follow through in God's hands. So we make the decision, and we ask God. We become willing to have God remove our defects of character, whatever ones are standing in the way of me being useful. And we treat the atmosphere of our lives by going out and doing 8 and 9 and standing up and taking responsibility for my own life for the first time ever. And then I get into the disciplines, and I've changed enough in the previous steps that I have the power to do something consistently with some commitment and discipline. And I start learning to watch my own feet. I start learning to watch for those manifestations of self. selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Ask God to remove them. Talk to another man, make amends quickly, turn my attention to someone I can help. And then in step 11, that craziness that Alcoholics Anonymous treats, that insanity of the mind. If I consistently, with discipline, do step 11, where I'm doing a consistent evening review and I'm touching base with God early in the morning, and I'm pausing throughout the day, and I'm looking for the inspired thought instead of the conspired thought, my whole life changes, and our thought life changes. And when our thought life changes, I change at that level of heart, where it's just who I be. And it's the greatest journey I've ever been on. So I highly recommend 6 and 7. Get some experience with it. Burn, have your face shield melt down around your helmet. It's the only way we learn. And everybody that has a face shield melted down around their helmet wears them like a badge of honor. And I still have mine because I still have an ego that's intact. It's more right sized today than it's ever been. And that's just because of the work in these steps. Thank you very much for having me.